Hello, how you doing? I'm doing well, thank you. It's me, Oscar, back again with another video and a new microphone. So I got a new microphone after just winging it with my phone, hoping and praying that it sounded okay, but here we are. Let me know how it sounds, and shout out to my editor Chris for doing his best with the last video and cleaning up the audio. So thank you. But here I wanted to try something new by not covering a new film, but an older one. And not just an older one, but an international film, a Korean film titled A Taxi Driver. So I finally got around to watching this film after it was sitting in my Blu-ray collection for some time, and I was pretty blown away by it. And I recall looking it up right away to see some thoughts and reviews on YouTube, and I recall getting some recommendations for Taxi Driver by Martin Scorsese, and I couldn't really find that many videos. So I kind of saw it as a chance to make myself an option for someone who's looking for that discourse or is thinking about watching it, or maybe hasn't heard of it at all and just want to hear me blab about it and see if maybe they give it a chance. So right off the bat, this film deals with real history and events, and this film does something that I don't think every historical film does, or that deals with history. It has this unique ability to introduce you to aspects of history and the past that can only be expressed so powerfully through film. And I can only speak for myself, but it kind of stirs up this curiosity to want to learn more and dig into the past. And I understand that while some films based off real people or events can be amped up to be dramatized and sensationalized, I like to think this film really succeeds at spotlighting some of the people who contributed to democracy in ways that we never know about, and they're unsung heroes, and it's nice to see them depicted in very engaging and humanizing ways. Alright, so A Taxi Driver. It released in 2017. It was directed by Jung Hoon. It stars the great Song Kaiho. And in my notes it says give him his flowers, and I will, because this guy, if you don't know him already, he's such a versatile actor. He's been in some amazing films like Parasite and Memories of Murder, and I'm sure a bunch of other stuff he's great at, but he can do it all. He can really do it all. And you see that in this film, especially with the transformation his character goes through, and I think he captures subtlety and acting very well, so I think for his performance alone, it's a great watch. And it also stars Thomas Kretzmann as reporter Jürgen Henspeter. So I'm not going to hype him up as much, but he does a really great job nonetheless. Alright, so behind my Blu-ray, the logline reads, "In this powerful true story set in 1980, a down-on-his-luck taxi driver from Seoul is hired by a foreign journalist who wants to go to the town of Gwangju for the day. They arrive to find a city under siege by the military government, with the citizens, led by a determined group of college students, rising up to demand freedom. What began as an easy fare becomes a life-or-death struggle in the midst of the Gwangju Uprising, a critical event in modern South Korea." Okay, so let's stop right there. Let's have a seat. I tried my best to try to encapsulate the Gwangju Uprising, but obviously with history, those small, intricate details are so important to everything, but I at least wanted to find some sort of summary that can help. So in the city of Gwangju during May of 1980, about 250,000 people protested against the military rule of South Korea in the hopes of initiating democratic reform. There were massive protests against the military state that took place all across the Republic of Korea. So essentially what was going on throughout the protest, they were put under martial law, the city was in complete lockdown, the city was just blockaded entirely, so roads were blocked, no one could get in, no one gets out, phone lines were cut, the media was censored, and suppression of the press from telling what's really going on, so it was very messy and a very bad situation. But back to the film itself and how it connects with history. So clearly, the real story has to get out there, and Jürgen, the German reporter, takes it upon himself to document what's really going on. And obviously this guy doesn't know his way around Korea, so he needs a driver. And that's where the taxi driver comes in, and boom, we're off. You have your setup, you have your odd pairing in these two characters, a looming military threat, and you have limited time to get in and out. And on top of that, this German reporter, this guy sticks out like a sore thumb. Like, obviously, he's not from here, so he's a clear target. Okay, and now I want to get into the meat and potatoes of the characters. So we're going to start with Kim Man-sob, the taxi driver. When we first meet Kim, you can quickly understand that he's, how do you say it? I was trying to find a nice way to say it, but the guy, he's cheap, he's self-serving, opportunistic, he's greedy, he lacks backbone, and he's so prideful. But at the same time, you can slowly connect the dots on why he is that way. He's a single father, a widower, he's behind rent and just barely scraping by to provide for himself and his daughter. And when it comes to reacting to the ongoing protest, he sees them as almost like a nuisance and just a hurdle to get through his workday. He berates them. He believes these students, part of the protest, are just wasting their time. I don't know if I'd describe him as apolitical or oblivious, but there's an obvious blind faith that the government and the military has everyone's well-being and best interest in mind. He's one of those, if you think it's so bad, why don't you go to another country type of people. So desperate for cash, he finds a way to become the driver for Jürgen. And now I want to cover Jürgen. So he starts off as just some reporter who feels a little bored with what he's doing, and he wants something new, something engaging to cover, the next big story, the next big scoop. And he takes an interest in the uprising after learning about how opposition leaders are being arrested and universities are being locked down. But at the same time, he doesn't understand the magnitude of what's going on. He's very nonchalant about it, as if it's just another job. And while he is discreet in his approach at the beginning, he doesn't grasp the stakes of the situation. And I can also describe him as a little stern, a little closed off, and he's driven by money as well. But just like Kim, he learns that it's bigger than him. So you have Kim and you have Jürgen. These guys are a very odd pairing, especially with their personalities. They just don't blend well with one another. But on top of that, you have a language barrier between the two. So Kim, he only speaks Korean, obviously, and very, very broken English. Jürgen only speaks English in this film. So how do they get around that? Well, there is a point where they can in this film, but it's only temporarily. But I think having that barrier with one another makes up for really fascinating and powerful scenes even. It's obviously played up for humor, but there are moments where they're upset with one another and they're just airing out their frustration, but they don't understand what one another are saying. So it's so interesting, but the use of body language and facial expressions and tone, it's enough to get the message across to one another. But my favorite part of it all, is those smaller, more quiet, intimate scenes where they're being vulnerable with one another after they're going through such a long, grueling journey. But they don't understand what they're saying to one another. They're being open, but they don't understand. But like I said, it's the tone of it all that really gets the message across. And it was just interesting to see their worlds be turned upside down, because they understand that there's a lot going on in the city and they have to document what's going on. But once they actually see it right in their face, it changes everything. Witnessing the brutality of it all, how inhumane the military is. It didn't matter if you're a teenager, a college student, a man or a woman, if you're old or young, they didn't care. If you're protesting, if you're part of this cause, then you're seen as the enemy. So once they're thrown into this pandemonium, it's a lot to take in, and it hits them right away, because you have mothers trying to find their sons, you have doctors and nurses scrambling to attend the injured at hospitals, and you have other fellow taxi drivers stressing to provide rides for supporters and the injured. It's a lot to take in, but I appreciate this film for not really holding back on seeing what it was like, seeing how horrific it really was. So after witnessing the brutality of it all, they both begin to learn that it's so much bigger than them. It's bigger than just a nice payday with a tip from a foreigner after driving them around all day. It's bigger than the next big scoop and capturing world news, because there are real people that are at risk and relying on you to get their story out there. And slowly but surely, they begin to understand that. And I think the thing that plays such a large impact on them are the supporting characters. They're one of my favorite parts of this film. They do such a great job at putting so much effort and detail into humanizing them. They're just college students with dreams and aspirations, with moms who worry about them. They're just taxi drivers who, at the end of the day, have to come back to their family and provide for them and put food on the table. There's a moment here where, after a long, exhausting, grueling day, they were able to come down at night, sit down, and share dinner together, and share some laughs, open up to one another, and it was one of my favorite parts of this film. And I think it's worth watching just for those small, intimate moments. So there's a lot here that I like. There's a lot that I really like. But there is, it's not a perfect film. There are moments where, yeah, it could be played up as a tad melodramatic, but I think that's just a charm to Korean cinema as a whole. But there is a moment here where we have two very powerful sequences that are very different from one another, but leave an impression for how they're portrayed. And there's just this random placement of a car chase in this film. And for me, I might be nitpicking, but it just felt so out of place because I felt like the sequences before it were enough. They felt like enough. And this car chase for me felt similar, or it reminded me of Star Wars, where they're in the ship and someone's in the gunner seat and he's all hyped up having to shoot these humans and robots or whatever. And it kind of felt like that, where, I don't know, at least for this scenario, it didn't feel necessary. Did it take away from the film as a whole? Absolutely not. But it took me out of it momentarily. But it's well done as it is, and I might be in the minority on that. So, with everything in mind, I think at the end of the day, it's so essential to have moments in history like this depicted on film. Of course, it's not going to be a one-for-one and completely accurate, and things are going to be dramatized, but I think it's important, especially if they're part of political climates that you're just unfamiliar with, like Korea. I didn't know very much about Korea's political history until this film, so it opens up a lot of doors for you to start to get this understanding and curiosity of what has happened. Especially now, where there's a lot of lies and deception in different ways. Like in the 80s, they didn't have the internet, but now we do. And it's a lot easier for deception to come through. And I think it's important to acknowledge times in history where people were able to stand up and galvanize together and fight in the face of tyranny. Like, for example, the German reporter, he's not Korean, but he chose to participate and do his part in trying to get that story out there. And just the thought of being able to come together that way, to get a message across, to expose the evils that are out there, I think it's so important to keep that in mind and remember things like that. So if you're going to watch this film, it's an emotional journey. I can speak for myself. I may have got a bit emotional or maybe shed a tear or two at some point, but that's how much of a profound impact it had on me. And I think it's worth at least giving it a shot. And I know some people tend to shy away from anything with subtitles, but I think if you just get beyond those little margins, like Bong Joon-ho said, if you can get beyond those 1-inch margins, then you'd be surprised how many great films are out there. And this is one of them. So give it a chance. Maybe watch some Korean films. And until next time, thank you so much for listening.